because if we're pointing the finger and enforcing blight and enforcing code enforcement, and we're an offender, what light does that put us on? But I believe Mr. Lafave had comments on this as well.
Okay. First off, my name is Earl Lafave, and I'm the owner of Tech Development along with my brother. But I could probably give a talk that lasted even longer than Doug's. Okay, because it's refreshing, quite frankly, to be with a group that is looking to be more progressive and not regressive in terms of what many communities are. They want the standards and the things to stay as they are. Well, things don't stay as they are. But to expand on what Barb just said, and to incorporate with much of what Doug just presented with his presentation, I've got a lot of notes, and I'll wait till the call of the public to give the rest of them. But I would say that really, and we're going to talk about this parking lot as being, all journeys start with the first step, okay? And also, I was taught a long time ago, you learn to walk before you run. But I see this particular location as being the ideal location to start exactly what Doug has been talking about. If you look at the very successful communities that surround us, Brighton, Howell, Northfield, Plymouth, as examples, they all have a central identity and a central theme. Go to Plymouth, you have Kellogg Park. Go to Northfield, you have the downtown area and the new beautiful park that was just built right in the middle of downtown. Go to Brighton and you have the Tridge and the downtown Mill Pond area. They all have a central area, and it doesn't have to be as big as any one of those areas, but it has to be an identity. This area could be turned into an identity for the township virtually overnight, not just as a parking lot, but more as a community meeting area. You could turn that area into something that's a mini version of Kellogg Park in downtown Brighton. Not just refurbish the parking area, but do something to enhance and identify it with a bit of what I would call an entryscape, possibly a small brick wall with your entranceway so the vehicles can get in and out. With the new sidewalks coming down Barker Road, that's going to help out tremendously. And then with the farmers market coming with the new management, it would greatly enhance that particular piece of property and allow everybody to identify with the downtown with that farmers market. I want to even go one step further. She didn't mention this part, but the building itself, I did a lot of research on the building about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, I believe it was, and we had our architects look at it. Not that I'm interested in buying it, but I was asked by certain members of the administration back then to look at it, so I brought my architects in, and we did a very quick analysis of the building and determined what could be done with it. At least at that time, other uses were being proposed. I have now thought of another idea, and it comes from many communities, not just locally, but from other cities and even countries, where they have an indoor, we'll call it marketplace. Think of Eastern Market as an example. Eastern Market was always an open air place. Now they've incorporated climate-controlled buildings so that Eastern Market now operates year-round. If you go to the downtown area of Toronto as an example, where they took their waterfront and created all these different pocket parks and the old warehouse buildings, they refurbished them. They didn't modernize them. That was the very eclectic part of what they did there. They just opened the space up, cleaned it up, and then they let all the different artisans come in, and that building, I believe, could be a huge asset to the community, if not today, at some point in time, where you could have individual vendors working out of the inside. The mom and pop, the person, the lady, the person that's doing ceramics, the person that's doing knitting work, whatever they could have, they could rent and use space in there. That's just an example of what might be done. But the parking lot and starting it out as an open marketplace, where they would be putting up their tents and their canopies and different things through the summertime, that could be expanded over time. If you look at a lot of these areas, again, going back to Kellogg Park in Plymouth, they have those areas. They have an open pavilion area where they have their farmers market, rain or shine. So if you've got bad weather, you've got an indoor facility there as an example. But to really refurbish that parking lot, to get it to a point where it could be much better in terms of, and aesthetically and visually much better, I think the budget is relatively small that needs to be done to do that. It might be a little more than what Barb was talking about initially, but again, we could look at doing it in phases. But that then becomes part of the placemaking concept that Doug's been talking about. We've now got an identity. That's an area, I can tell you from a developer standpoint, I salivate every time I think of that downtown and what could be done. I've looked for a development potential for 40 years, and I've never found anything like Whitmore Lake, and I'm not blowing hot air here right now to tell you. You have every piece of the puzzle, but it's got to be put together now. And as Doug said, you know, Alpena is the only one, I didn't even realize Alpena had what you have here. You have the water, you have easy access to the expressways, you have utilities, you have everything that are all the pieces of the puzzle. All you have to do now is begin to start to put them together. And I think that first piece of the puzzle is that community gathering area. If you go back in history, you'll see that when towns were started, as Doug was talking about in his presentation, people had a common space. And it typically was the church. The church is where everybody started. They met on Sunday for church. They had their socials, their picnics, or everything. And then it eventually evolved into parks in the downtown areas. That's exactly what you have available to you right now. You've got a location that would be perfect. I couldn't think of anything more centrally located, easily accessible, and with Barker Road as being one of your main entranceways into the community, and enhancing it with some of the grants that have now been put in place. It couldn't be a better opportunity to use that piece of property as that launching point or that beginning point of starting that placemaking process in the community. Create an identity, and you have part of that identity already, but it hasn't been developed yet. The water's there, the community there, the small town, the historical aspects of it. It's all there. All the pieces of the puzzle are there. But you got to get something, a catalyst to get it going. And I honestly believe that's one of the catalysts, if not the catalyst, to get things moving. Now you're going to bring people into town, okay, and you're going to do things that, and you're going to have activities, starting with a farmer's market. That could then evolve very quickly into other community type of functions, activities, and bringing pedestrian traffic into town. I could go on for another half hour.
The thing that I'm not saying is that,
Can we get, if the people would just raise their hands, I see two hands go up, and then we start speaking. Okay.
I just had a thought, but
Okay.
the communities that you suggested and you named off there, they do have some great, local areas. I lived in Plymouth. The problem ends up being is that when you compare Whitmore Lake and our community to those communities, the thing that you're leaving out when you're talking about is that they have a current tax base, a business tax base that they collect revenues from. The problem that we have is that we don't have that. So we have a limited budget that we are working with in order to actually try and maintain services for the citizens in our community. These other communities have a much greater ability in order to spend money and turn these things into parks and as you suggest. So, frankly, the way that revenue sharing is going to be cut in the state here, I have some real reservations about even talking about spending money on something like that when we're looking at having to ask our employees potentially in order to start paying more for their health care.
If I can just answer that quickly, what we're suggesting here, could you please correct me if I'm wrong? We're proposing that the DDA take this on as a project. This is not going to affect your general fund money. This will come out of the DDA budget. And the DDA budget isn't part of your general fund. So it's something that we're talking about taking on as a DDA project. And doing it in phases, please tell me if I'm out of line here, and doing it in phases, starting with this first contribution and a beginning refurbishing of that area, to get that ball rolling with that piece. So it's not something that would be in any way impacting the finances of the township.
See, one of the things is that last meeting that we had a long discussion about this. And frankly, we haven't decided whether we're even going to keep that property at all or not. I mean, that has not been decided yet. So that's been the whole key thing about whether or not that, the funding that you're proposing, whether it's something that we're, even looking at as accepting as a way moving forward. So I think the first piece of the puzzle needs to be that we need to figure out what we're going to end up doing with that property. I mean, frankly.
Mr. Mayleben, you had your hand up next. and
I
then
just,
Mr. Quinto.
first of all, you said indoor market, and the first thing that popped in my brain was a facility called North Market in Columbus, Ohio. North side of downtown.
I know the area you're talking about.
And it's a beautiful space. I was there for a business meeting, had a half a day, wandered over, did a little fresh shopping. There, there's a butcher shop there, all kinds of things. It reminded me of the Pike Street Fish Market in Seattle. That kind of Capital Market in Lansing. There's a facility in Lansing, same thing. With regard to the development or the enhancement, the sprucing up of the parking lot area, if you were to do something with that building at a later point in time, whether it's tomorrow, a year from now, or 10 years from now, I would imagine that a nice, refreshed parking lot is going to add to the property value at some level. So if the DDA says, we'd like to contribute $10,000, and I just use the number you gave, towards this enhancement, maybe there's a mechanism that says if we sell the building, that we reimburse the DDA, maybe not the $10,000, maybe 75% of it as an offset, because we've gotten some use out of it, and that leaves your options open to do whatever the board sees fit with that space, but doesn't leave the downtown us, I'm speaking the royal us, sitting, waiting, nothing happening. Just an idea.
Mr. Dockett had his hand up next, then Mr. Quinto.
Earl, I believe you are blowing smoke. 435 West 8 Mile Road at US 23 near Whitmore Lake, a former factory that was demolished for development. Owner Earl Lafave owes $120,782 for 2008 taxes. According to the county record, he owes $216,132 through 2009. If you want to do something for Northfield Township, come to Northfield Township and do something with your property.
Well, I'll answer that very quickly. It's taken me 2 years to reach a settlement with the previous property owners to clean the site up. I just got that, as I've explained to several people in the township. I just finally resolved it with the previous people who spent 50 years polluting it, and I almost have it all cleaned up now. And I've worked with the county in terms of the county treasurer, who has given me a substantial amount of relief in a period of time, understanding the amounts of money that I'm spending cleaning the site up. So that was my priority first, was to clean it up and work with the county, never ever at any point in time deny or abdicate my responsibility to pay it. But they also have said that they were willing to work with me on this. So that's the status of that right now. I know.
Mr. Dockett, just as a matter of point here, that is old information. It was dated March 3rd. When that article first came out, I talked to the county treasurer, and she told me that it is not under foreclosure, although it says that in the article. It's old information. Mr. Dockett, I'm sorry, Mr. Quinto, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Last year, the board researched in itself and really considered what to do with the property. At one point, the board did make a motion to sell the property with several board members absent. And then, with strong reconsideration, I believe the whole board came mostly together and saw a different vision of retaining that property at 75 Parker, because they really heard from all of the property owners along Main Street, a lot of the businesses throughout the community, that if that property is sold, that the opportunity for any additional parking would be lost within the downtown area within immediate means. yes, if the Vancouver property gets developed, then yes, there would be additional parking in there hopefully at some given point, if indeed that ever does happen. But we, as a board, I believe, reviewed that decision, thought long and hard, and said we need to make a commitment to our downtown area, and that is to retain that property, to retain that building, to look at venues of restoring it, and to make a commitment to the downtown area to say, yes, this is a focal point, an important point to the downtown community members, because without that property there, it would really lead havoc to a lot of parking constraints that are present, to the opportunity to actually, again, as Earl has stated, and as many people have used that property for in the past, present years as a community activity center, and when it was a fire department, but definitely the second floor was utilized in that fashion. So, again, it can definitely and easily be brought back to that point in the future with funding that may be made available. But again, I think the board did make a commitment to the community to retain that parcel for a period of time so that we can go ahead and look at improving it. And as Mr. Mayleben said, I like that conceptual viewpoint to look at it. Why keep it in limbo when we have the funds through the DDA? Because again, I'm one of the taxing agencies that puts funds into it, because the funds for the DDA are on TIF, and the only way those funds are collected is through the commercial district areas, such as one of my properties, and the only way that those TIF improvement funds actually could get larger is if we do improve our properties. And the only way we're going to improve our properties, again, if we see more people coming into the community. A great opportunity came forward this summer for the DDA enhancement grant, or the facade improvement grant. So hopefully we'll have maybe 5 or 6 businesses take advantage of that, which again will help, bring in more people to the community and help the business areas give themselves a facelift. And in doing so, it would actually increase more funds to the TIF, because, again, it's a kind of double-edged sword. Yes, we're going to improve our property, but because we're improving it, we're going to pay a higher tax on it. And because we're doing that, then several of the funds are going to go to the DDA, because again, they're captured only on the commercial entities within the community. So I think, again, I felt last year we as a board, when we reversed its decision, made a commitment to retain the property. So that's the way I feel as one board member.
Dr. Barb, I had a question.
Yes.
And that was, this money, does it have strings? What kind of strings are attached, or are there conditions?
I think this is something that we need to sit down with the board and negotiate. At this point, there are no strings attached. We see it as public parking that's available, that's not in the best shape, and something that we can offer for the businesses in the downtown area. There is public parking. It's a very nice parking lot. There's a walkway from the public parking to your business. We would want to sit down with the board and discuss if Mr. Mayleben's approach is good. I, like Mr. Laquinto, understood that it was agreed that it was going to stay in township hands, and one of the reasons was the parking. We've signed a commitment for a market master for market on Thursdays all through the summer months into September, and we would like to use that location. We would like it to look nice, people coming to visit our market. Yes.
Mr. Stanalajczo, before you do, I haven't made a comment yet on this subject. Before we get into second or third rounds of comments, I would like to. I really liked the perspective, and this is what's a great thing about having joint meetings and bringing fresh and different perspectives. I want to enjoy what we had to say, Mr. Mayleben, about the fact that this money is not ever really lost. It's the DDA puts something into it. I mean, yes, you lose something through depreciation, but that doesn't affect whether this board decided to keep or not keep that building, because it would only enhance that. It would enhance the sale, it would enhance any future tenant. We've talked about perhaps leasing it, we've talked about signing it. Anything that we do to it that's an improvement is only going to make it better, plus it's our property to maintain anyway. So thank you very much for pointing that out to us. And I really like that perspective. Mr. Stanalajczo, you have a comment?
Well, the commitment that Sam had mentioned last year about maintaining that property in our community was with stipulations that that was going to end up being leased to Northfield Human Services, and that they were going to undertake the rehabilitation of that building with grants and everything like that. That's when that sale was rescinded, and that was the intention. But in December, that whole thing came apart. So now we're left with a building that was originally committed to be restored with grants and funds by a nonprofit organization, and we had agreed to do that, and now we're left with nothing. So that's when that whole thing went through, that we had made the commitment to keep that with these stipulations that this was all going to take place. And that's where it all fell apart just 2 months ago. So now we're left again with the building with, we have to try and make some kind of decision exactly what it is we're going to do with. Because we don't have the funds in order to change that.
Well, just to comment on that, and kind of piggyback on what Mr. laquinto had to say about this, we didn't have just one plan, we had backup plans. And we talked about doing something with Northfield Human Services, and all along we recognized the difficulties of dealing with two entirely different entities. And we always had in our backup plan, and it's something we discussed at a board level. We were all there and we all discussed it. That
Never voted on anything.
that if we needed to, or if we wanted to, that was something that the township could pursue as far as making that into a community center, or if nothing else, that we may look at some short-term lease with another entity so that we have more time to decide what we'd like to do, or we would have more time to explore granting opportunities. Because the only way that many of these communities that we have heard and seen about, they all didn't start out successful. They all started out poor. They all started out without a lot of resources and without a lot of business contributing to a huge tax base. But they got that way because of their planning, because of their investment into their own community, and it grew. And if we do nothing, ours won't. We'll be as stagnant 10 years from now as we are today, if we don't make some steps and we don't move in that direction to enhance. Mr. laquinto.
I would agree, again, moving in the community in 1993, it has been tremendously steady, and it has been very sad as a resident and as a business owner. And again, if we don't really capitalize on our responsibilities as planning commission and as township board members, and look at the plan and look at what's best for this community as a whole, and plan for it for 10, 20, 30 years down the road, why are we even here now? Because to me, that's what our responsibility is not to look nearsighted, it's to look farsighted down in the future. I mean, we can look nearsighted and say, okay, let's sell the property for $200,000, $250,000. But is that the best interest for this community as a whole? To me, that's why it's been kept within the community for X amount of years, so that that would never happen, that it would be used as a community property entity for future use. And again, I think it was even brought up that the property was donated to the community, to the township, and it had to remain in township entity hands. I think that was one of the things that came up even back when we discussed this last summer. That came up, I don't remember.
It's not true. But it isn't true that it has to remain. It was never written into the deeds. But we don't have nothing, we have something. We still have our property there. And selling in the down market would probably be, without being compelled to for any reason. We are financially solvent and healthy. And we're not compelled to sell that property for any reason whatsoever. To do it in a down market would not be the most prudent thing for our taxpayers. Mr. Mayleben.
I spend most of my day in my day job problem solving, identifying situations that my staff brings to me and figuring out a solution for that. And I always like to understand the range of choices. Before you problem solve, you have to understand where the edges of the table are. Not advocating any of these choices, not presuming to tell the board what choice they should choose. But, you know, the choices range from bulldozing it completely and turning it back into natural grasslands to selling it, renovating it, or selling it to somebody else. With the exception of the bulldozing it completely, a refreshed, nicely styled, appropriately architecturally attractive, I'm not sure the right words to use, parking lot helps you in anything else you decide to do. You want to lease it, that's going to help you. You want to sell it, that's going to help you. You want to renovate it and use it for some other township facility, offices, whatever, that will help you in that process. I think the DDA, and I don't mean to put words in the mouth of the DDA, that they're saying, we're going to pay for that. They want, if, you know, at the end of the day, if there's a commitment that if we do get rid of it, we'll use some of those monies to reimburse. It's sort of like remodeling your bathroom at home before you put your house on the market. If you haven't remodeled in 30 years, people aren't going to buy it. You got to refresh it so that you then can sell your house or rent your house or whatever. It seems like a fairly straightforward
I make a
conversation.
motion that this board engage in negotiations to work with the DDA to come to an agreement about having them proceed forward with doing rehabilitation to that parking lot.
I would support that because.
Okay, we have a motion by Mozurkewich.
We've not, our board has not even voted on it.
We have a motion by Mozurkewich, we have support by Mr. Laquinto. Is there discussion?
Yes. As a board, we need to make a decision on what's going to happen with that property before
It's
we
in
get,
motion
before we
to
get more.
negotiate, sir.
Huh?
It's a motion to negotiate with the DDA. It's
No,
not
we can't,
putting anything in
let's
stone.
settle it first, what we're going to do. We have to vote on that. It's just a backdoor deal to get them involved. This board has to make the decision, and we have not done it, and we've not voted on it.
That's your opinion, next.
That's my opinion.
Next.
We've not voted on it. So it's a limbo. So that's why I would support that.
You know, again, I respect Mr. Mayleven's viewpoint. This would only assist in any mode that this board decides to do. It only makes practical, good business sense, and to me, that's what we are responsible to the citizens of the township. So an investment, again, it's not coming from township dollars, it's coming from DDA dollars. It's not coming from our general fund. It's not coming from any tax base from the residents. It's coming from the commercial district, which I am one of, and it does only enhance our options moving forward. It's a smart business choice. I support this.
With the agreement that the parking lot would have additional restrictions for conditional use by the DDA. Now, that, we can't get them involved in this until we make the decision what we're going to do.
Is there anybody that hasn't commented that would like to make a comment on it? Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
Motion is carried.